Thank you very much, Neil. And in the background, we had Nate Smith and Robert Sin, two big followers of American Eagle Gold. Listen to that presentation by Neil. And they have some questions for a Q&A segment that we have that hopefully answer a few questions that some of the investors have that watched that video about our 2025 drill plan. So thank you very much, Nate and Robert, for joining.
I mean, I guess I'll start with a couple of questions, then I'll pass it off to Nate, and then we can maybe go back and forth. I find the four holes you have planned to the south in the IP embayment zone, and then I saw there's one even farther to the east to be very interesting. Can you explain the methodology for those holes and what exactly you're targeting in those four holes?
Yeah, so share screen again and go back to the zoom in on these guys. Let's go to the map that shows the topography there, the aerial imagery. So I really like this zone to the south. There's a few different lines of evidence that point to this being a good target. South 32's remodeling of the geophysics identified another very prominent resistivity high down along that ridge that roughly correlates to the same trend we see in the magnetic signature. So that's likely a real feature. And from the holes we have approaching this zone, the top of hole 9 was very strongly anomalous. The bottom of 19, we started to see more mineralized conglomerate towards the bottom of it, and a few little blips of mineralized diking, which is very interesting to see. And the bottom of 36 again started to be fairly, there's a bit of a lull in it, and then mineralization picked up again. So we have some hints that mineralization, we're still within the system out here, right? We want to see, is there another sub-high? Is there another center of mineralization? We know there's a lot of different events going on at NAC, so that's a possibility. And on surface, there's mineralized diking. So this area specifically, we want to just cover the volume along this trend as effectively as possible. And so where we've planned these collars right now, there's little clearings in the forest. They end up being really nice locations to put pads. And then once we have some good solid evidence that there's mineralization out there, then we can do some more systematic follow-up down to the south, up back to the north, and fill in the zone between these guys. So that's kind of the thinking in this area. It's a similar story with 95 Q and S out to the far east. 90 or 25, sorry, 95. It's 30 years later. 95 33 hit some very interesting mineralization, and it's modeled to be outside the intrusive stuff. There's still some nice blips of high-grade mineralization in these shallow holes that were drilled historically as well. This is getting into a zone where we're likely going to be in that more pyritic halo, and then transitioning towards our more chalcopyrite-rich zones from what we can infer from the similar geophysical signature elsewhere on the property. The area up here this is right up against a bit more of a prominent bluff. There's old historical exploration trail that winds its way up there. Putting it down in this little clearing here, I think makes the most sense to start to get an idea of the geology and the mineralization potential of this. We don't have a ton of information on it. It's still, these are 500-meter grids. It's still a good 250, almost 300 meters away from that closest historical hole. So it really does act as a big step out. And then it allows us quite a bit of potential to follow up to the north and to the south. So that's the thinking for these initial big step outs, right? Honestly, there's a lot of potential along this trend, but we want to leave ourselves in a position where we have the information to kind of build to the model that we have. So we don't want to be stepping out super far from the main zone here. we've modeled that there's dikes that we've seen here likely trend down into this area. So we want to have holes planned on this area where we have dike trends modeled to continue out to, right? Whereas stepping up a bit further out here at this point without that information, it doesn't put us in as good a position to leverage the information. So this is, yeah, it's kind of the thinking here. Yeah, really looking forward to what comes out of these.
Big picture, I'm really interested in how you guys interpret NAC at this point in time. It's a porphyry system, but it's an atypical porphyry system. There's even a couple guys who call it a contact skarn, porphyry skarn. It's atypical, it's different, it doesn't have the typical zonation that we see in all those nice porphyries in Latin America. Can you explain to the layperson, like the Babine porphyry stock, what is its relevance? Is it the source intrusion for all the metal that we're seeing around the blue sky donut? And are you going to drill into the Babine porphyry stock, this season, or is it more just about targeting like the dike swarms?
No, I mean, I'm sure Charlie's going to want to weigh in here too. The team has done quite a bit of work on interpreting what exactly NAC is in the broader context of porphyry understanding. What we know is that there was an initial early high temperature event. We see some evidence of A veining, albeit sparse, but barren A veining that indicates an initial, like possibly throughout the main zone, there was a period of time where it was too high temperature for porphyry mineralization to form. But then what we see is this very strong mineralization in that zone within disseminations and sulfide replacement, and then these later in place dikes. So there was a secondary event at play, likely responsible for bringing in the mineralization. What we've always known about the porphyry stock itself is that, I mean, it likely drove the big alteration footprint we see. It's likely responsible for some of that early potassic alteration and albitization, but it itself is cut with what looked like sharp, straight, what would have been brittle at the time veins cutting through, which shows that the porphyry stock itself had been cool and crystalline for some time before this second event was bringing in these fracture hosted and nice vein hosted bornite and chalcocite as we get deeper. So it's not a straightforward single event system, and there's a variety of different compositions of the various mineralized phases as well. So it seems like it's on a confluence of things happening, right? And the footprint that we've drilled is still relatively small in the grand scheme of the expression of the overall anomaly here. So there's a lot of work to be done to still piece it together, but what we know right now is it's at least a composite system. There's a number of different events going on that result in the alteration we're seeing now.
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to jump in there, but
Yeah.
I kind of like to jump in. And I think if you watch the presentations that I give, it does give a little bit of a different story. When you look at the model and the plan view that Neil shows, you see the stock, you see the host rocks, this mainly to the west, shown to the west there, and then you see a number of phases of dikes in the greens, and then the quote unquote copper dikes. Well, those later the dikes that are shown there that cut the stock and the stratigraphic rocks, I mean, those are clearly post-dating the stock. You can explain the veins that you see in the stock to be related to, a later event that more or less correlates with those dikes. What we don't show here, and what it's more difficult to model, is this swarm of dikes that runs roughly north-south along the western margin of the stock. And that mineralization is driven largely before the stock arrives. So the stock is kind of a mid-sequence intrusive event. We see it cutting, earlier rocks. We don't see it anywhere nearly as altered as this swarm of dikes that runs west of the stock, and they vary in quite a bit in composition too, but they're definitely earlier, relative to the stock. So it's difficult to model. I kind of feel we should show a zone going up there that correlates with where the mineralization is, because when you look in detail, at least when I look in detail, I see that many of those phases, most of them, actually bring some mineralization with them. So the overall footprint that you see, geophysically, namely the high chargeability ring around the Babine porphyry stock, the total magnetic intensity high that correlates with the stock, that is related to the stock to some degree, but also to the other mineralizing earlier dikes. So it's a composite feature, kind of geophysically dominated by the stock, but so far, the mineralized zones that we've drilled are largely, outboard and a little bit to the west of the stock, and they don't necessarily, the grade does not necessarily yield the best grades right next to the stock. It's outboard of that, and it's related to these dikes that are very difficult to connect from hole to hole and section to section. We see similar compositions in individual holes and on individual sections, but actually linking them together is much more difficult to do than those later ones, which are, kind of more recognizable compositions and maybe less altered, etc. So, it really is a composite feature. And, we tested that stuff to the west, and yeah, it's not typical, like many porphyry systems where you see, a quartz stockwork zone above the top and along the upper sides of an intrusion. It's a little bit different. There's an earlier thing and a later thing, and together they make, a real nice marriage. And we still don't know where all the children are. We're still chasing them. So, complicated, but complicated is often good. And I think we're showing that with the progress we're making. And yeah, we're still trying to figure things out, but you also want to try and kind of summarize it and, look exactly what Neil has shown here. There's that north-south trend. That
Yeah.
is where a lot of these early dikes are.
All right. Thank you.
You
Nate, go
bet.
for it.
Yeah, no, great question, right? It still leaves a lot of mystery on the table, but leaves you wondering on, can we source or chase those to source, or do they coalesce in an area at depth, or do they trend to the north? I mean, I think you guys now this year have a good handle on this enough to be able to say, okay, well, we know what we want to chase given what we have in hand, and then see where that takes us. And I mean, I would say that's iterative process that you guys have gone over since 2022 to 2024 and coming into 2025 is, we open doors and it turns out there's more doors behind that. So it'll be interesting to see where this year's planned, right? I would say, Neil, just to butcher it in high level, right? We're going to hit some of the infill / we'll call it target refinement data, and then you're going to start pushing out both north and south and what the main drilled zone is to see where that takes you. I'm looking forward as well to the major step outs. I think the embayment zone with hole 9 and then subsequent, some of the surface work you guys have done have definitely set that up for a follow up. And then, of course, yeah, working around the clock there with the further step out to the east. So, I guess at a high level, the first hole set, how much of the plan is that? Like, so that'll be the first set of holes, and then what do you guys have budgeted for the remainder of the year? Is it going to be is that
It'll
set
be
in stone
double.
yet?
It'll be realistically double that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's the
yeah,
opening. Yeah,
I mean, the plan is to start with 2 rigs right off the hop. Likely bring a 3rd rig in from August to December. So that leaves us with 4 months of drilling with 3 rigs and almost 2.5 months of drilling with 2 rigs. So
yeah.
It's a
Okay.
long drill season, and yeah, it's not out of the question to start approaching that 30,000 meter mark this season.
Right.
That's kind of the goal.
Okay. And I guess that runs into one of my questions, which was like that looking further ahead. I mean, the plan cutoff is December, but there's nothing stopping you guys this year to push all the way through if you wanted, or what's that look like from a camp arrangement and planning there? Is that something that can be expanded on?
I mean, if we have 3 rigs, that gives us the requisite number of heads to keep camp open at the current operating cost, without camp operating at a loss or us having to subsidize the cost of having camp open.
Okay.
So in the winter, it doesn't really make a ton of economic sense from an efficiency standpoint to run 1 or 2 rigs. It would have to be a fairly big program. That said, if we're onto something really big and it looks like it definitely warrants it, nothing's off the table, right? Tony's got a very much of a, if we want to drill it. And we have that cushion in the treasury right now, which is an awesome position to be in. So yeah, I mean, I'm always trying to think about efficiency because it's just good practice with a junior company. We're not in the business of making money, we're in the business of spending money. And so the longer we can stretch that money, the better. So the back of my mind about all of these things, I'm always trying to think about what's the most efficient way to do this. But eventually it comes to a point, hopefully, that doesn't matter as much, right? And it's proving up the attractiveness of this and getting this package for a sale. So, I mean, obviously very forward looking, but until that point, it's about making the money we have go as far as we can.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, phase one for the large parts going to help us develop phase two. We have an idea what we want to do in phase two, but phase one's going to help us do that. And then based on what happens in phase one and then phase two will help us determine, our cost of capital and whether it makes sense to drill, possibly never ending drilling. So a lot of it's depending on what we're hitting. And a lot of those images that Neil's showing, even the ones that are in the main zone, there's still big step outs. They're still drilling in areas we haven't drilled. And the big focus here is to prove that this thing is economic from the start, fast payback. That's what Tech and Sub 32 want. And then doing big step outs at the same time, where Neil showed you near 9 and on the eastern extension. And likely phase two will have a lot more step outs, and there's holes there that we haven't even put in there. They're probably north of our drilling zone. So right now we have a pretty good idea that 85% of the holes that we show for phase one are going to be drilled. And once we're pretty much close to finish phase one, we'll have a pretty good idea where the rest of the holes are going to go. But we're looking at 30,000 meters, drilling till the mid of December minimum, and then figure things out after that. But we're hoping for the best, and I'm hoping that we never stop drilling.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Yeah, so just the opening volley, right? I like it.
Yeah.
So on the presentation here today, you covered some of the updated magnetics there, and you're saying that you're seeing, with the refined modeling that you have, it's showing some of that trending and alignment with some of the results you have to date. Is that leading you guys to do any more further refinement or additional modeling of that magnetic data at this time?
Yeah, we're getting a magnetic vector inversion done with a couple other different products tacked into that. It's a pretty robust data set. So there's a fair bit that one who's sufficiently technically inclined can do with it. And so we've reached out to a group that specializes in processing this style of magnetic data. And hopefully that helps us. It's very interesting to see the fabrics holding together as well as they do with the geology, right? It's a pretty good validation of that. And we'll see how it looks in 3D if the data set's amenable. It's not a huge cost to the program to get that work done. So we think it's worth it.
I think one thing to mention with that too, and in relation to an earlier question about, what's going on within the stock. I mean, we talk about those dikes and the timing of them. Well, you see those late dikes, the green colored ones on the plan view, heading into the stock and through it. Well, those dikes have a low mag signature in general. And they're fairly substantial in size in places for sure, and very, very well mineralized. So, that's one of the things where phase one, we get more certain about the orientation and the location in the north of those kind of dikes. And then, phase two, you're just walking those things out if they're giving you, some nice looking results, which they have so far. So that's one of the exciting things, and one of the ways we can use this data, and use the phase one drilling to drive phase two holes.
I think somebody else mentioned we mentioned the big step outs and stuff, but the reason why we got in this property in the first place is we had a target at depth. We thought something big was underground. Obviously, it's expensive to get there. And we shifted gears because in 2022, we hit some really great stuff at surface that people really hadn't drilled before. So we kind of changed our plan a bit. But as we've drilled over the last 3 years, we've continued to hit some really great stuff at depth. And we didn't show this in the model, but our plan is we have the mag. We're building upon a model as well as that MVI that Neil was mentioning. But if our drilling is starting to prove that this model looks like it's correct, then in phase 2, we have the opportunity to go deep. And when I say deep, I don't mean 1,000 meters. There's a potential to go 1,400 meters, 2,000 meters, if the model's proving right and the mineralization is high enough. Just on phase 1, it just doesn't make sense with the cost of capital if we haven't proved out the model yet. But that's something that's still in the cards that we didn't talk about yet.
We'll call that the phase 2 reveal phase plan if it is actually on the table. We look forward to seeing that. Yeah, the mag study, of course, you can see a bit better at depth than relative to, say, your IP study, correct, Neil?
I don't know. Honestly, I'm not super familiar with magnetic vector inversions. I've worked with magnetic susceptibility inversions before, and just being fully upfront, that bore absolutely no relation to reality whatsoever. Whereas I've seen IP data hold together pretty well. So I always approach geophysics from a skeptical first standpoint until it's proven by the drill. But this is very different data, right? The magnetic susceptibility inversion was generated from a VTEM data set, and it's notoriously difficult to model. There's a lot of cover there, and most of the rocks were fairly non-magnetic. So we've got quite a bit of magnetic contrast here, so there might be a lot more success. It just, yeah, it depends on a variety of factors. And I'm not super familiar with this method, but you know, we've had it recommended by a number of people, including Steve Garwin there. So that's yeah, why we're following it up.
Yeah, great. And of course, you already have the drilling on it as well, too. So once overlaid,
Yes.
you'll be able to
Yeah,
quickly
so
validate if that model's accurate.
we will be able to validate it very quickly and say, does this line up with reality? What's the showing here? Can we extrapolate that out to untested locations? So yeah, it's excellent data to have regardless.
The good thing about having the cash that we have, as opposed to previous years, is the budget that we were able to spend in the off season of having, you know, Charlie and Neil's great team work up the models, work up with the data over the last 6 months. Because we don't want to explore the drill bit. We want to explore based on the models and all the good geological work his team has done, but it's also being able to afford that mag study, being able to afford that extra money it costs for the inversion, be able to afford the Alan Wilson, the Steve Garwins that come off the street, give you independent reviews. And again, Steve Garwin recommended other people that we're using for the mag. Again, being able to afford helicopters. So with this treasury, we're able to put the drill in the ground. You can have the greatest rocks in the world, but if you don't have the cash, you can't explore. So everything's really coming together well, and it takes a village. And again, same with South 32. They've been helpful on the technical side. They have a big team working on this. Obviously, they put a lot of money into our company, and you know they're going to give us some holes that they have the rights to choose as well, and those will be coming out eventually. They just haven't chosen them yet. So a lot of things still to come.
If I could jump in, you know, the two main questions I think I have heading into this season are the, you know, metallurgy. So that's question number one. And Steve Garwin had some comments about that and the importance of the gold being able to float, and whether the gold runs with the chalcopyrite and the bornite or it's found somewhere else. If you know, if you guys could delve into that and explain that a bit, and what kind of, you know, metallurgical testing plans you have for 2025. That's the first question. And the second one is just higher grade cohesive zones, right? And so the zone that pops out, and since 2023, it's been, you know, I think my favorite zone is the gold enriched south zone, because you have the potential for an open pit in this area. So maybe do this question first, and you can go back to the met testing later. So the Golden Ridge South Zone, how big is it right now based upon the drilling that you've done the last 3 years, and what is the potential for expansion there?
Right now, it's about 200 meters by 200 meters down to about 200 meters depth. So it's a decent volume of rock. There's room to expand it by 100 meters to the north, at least 100 meters to the south. And the historical holes in there are quite sparse too, so potentially even further. And then if it shows connectivity to that zone out to the west, we've got a few holes planned to show how wide that zone is, around 17 and 31. Expanding that further out to the west with some additional testing, staying within that favorable conglomeratic horizon, and pushing any results we get from that up to the north and south as well. So as it stands right now, from our current drilling, it's it's fairly modest size, but I think there's a lot of potential to show that volume of rock has higher grades than we have historically drilled to the northeast of it, and B, much larger extent if we show connectivity to that zone down to the west, and then further expand that zone to the west. So yeah, there's lots of room for advancement on the that good economic driving south pit idea. And so that's why we have so much focus there. I think what we really want to take away from phase one is to be able to have enough information to show, regardless of what we hit in the step outs, that we've got something that might be economically viable at NAC, just outside of any of the other blue sky. And that's shaping up very nicely from our off-season modeling. And so we want to just be able to confirm that. And then that falls directly into the metallurgy as well. So once we have the best handle we can on the geometry of the different mineralized zones, I think the idea for metallurgy would be to do a proper met test where you drill HQ core and you sample the whole thing by twinning a hole. It's an expensive met test, but if this is worth it, then it's the best way to get the best information you can for it. We've got a little bit of hints of good met results. We did some size fraction testing on some of the mineralized diking, and it showed excellent sulfide liberation, which is good to see. And we know from just associations, the gold for the most part is associated with an increase in either chalcopyrite or bornite. So there's definitely association between the gold and the sulfide abundance. It's not one-to-one. There's zones that are highly sulfide abundant that don't have as much gold, but all the zones that do tend to carry gold have an uptick in the amount of sulfides. So there's anecdotally a pretty strong association there.
Yeah, if I recall from the Garwin presentation, he was talking about that ratio of chalcopyrite bornite to pyrite, and showing how that pyrite was very much outboard of a lot of where the mineralization that you guys have hit associated with those gold rich areas, right?
Yeah, there's very little pyrite throughout the main zone at all, which is good from a concentrate and flotation perspective. So that's excellent. Yeah, that work will follow up naturally from the results this season. So
nice. Have you guys done any like in the microprobe work that you've done? Have any of that in that area shown gold association to date, or I mean that still means a met test on it, but
the microprobe with the grade of gold that we have, I did an estimate. You probably need to prepare about 30 thin sections to see actual gold grains in a microprobe, just from looking at the odds. So like when you're talking about a gram per ton over 3 meters, if the gold was associated with very narrow dikes and veins and it spiked the grade up a lot. There was one instance of NAC where we had some nice coliform quartz veining and NAC 2202 that ran 20 grams per ton. And that might be an example of a place where you could see some gold grains, but that's not representative of the bulk of the gold mineralization at NAC. So yeah, we've done some microprobe work on the actual like mounting a bunch of the crush on the rock and doing modal mineral quantification. But there was no gold observable in that, unfortunately.
Great.
And then I would
Okay.
just throw out, I'd go around to each one of you, Neil, Charlie, and Tony. What are you most excited about for this year? And what are you most worried about?
I'm excited for some great drill results. And I'm worried I'm gonna have so many drill results that I won't have the time this summer to have fun with my family and be writing up some news releases. So that's my worry, forward-looking statement.
And I guess for me, I'll let Neil save the best for last and let him go last. I would say, I'm just always excited about learning more about the geology and the controls on mineralization and how that allows you to focus. And we have a number of different areas where we'll learn a lot with this drilling. For one, because we're doing oriented core, so we'll learn a lot more about the structural control, if you want, on with the orientation of dikes and veins, etc. So that'll allow us to chase with a little bit more certainty. So that excites me no matter what part of the system we're looking at. And am I worried about this? No, because what I see just on the west side, if you're a conservative person, I think that's able to carry the day out there. And then so that makes the external tests, just upside and blue sky and, no expectations. But, I'm sure we're going to hit some good stuff out there. Driving farther south and a bit more east, maybe on the main trend you see in those old holes that are all shallow, that there's some pretty nice mineralization, and I think we can chase things like that. We're going to hit some exciting stuff. Maybe it's not all going to be amazing, but I think we're going to have some real gems in there.
Yeah, I guess I'm really excited about some of the step outs. Even I'm excited to drill to the west of 17. I think that'll be really interesting. We see some hints of some really interesting deep mineralization from hole 16, which is along that trend a little bit to the north. And I'm curious to see if that maybe comes to surface a bit further out to the west. So that's I'm pretty excited about that. What worries me is hitting more of these copper dikes at places we're not expecting them and it blowing up the model we have. Because I like things to be simple and easy to figure out. And so far, NAC has not been, right? And that has been the story throughout all the seasons. You think you have an idea of like, oh, we're at this depth and this unit is probably pretty steeply dipping. Let's test here. And we don't hit it. This is weird. And then you drill 400 meters away, 400 meters above it, and you hit the same dike. And you're like, well, this doesn't line up in any reasonable way. What the hell is going on? So I'm guaranteed we're going to have instances like that this season. And it's just going to be, I mean, it's a fun frustration to have. But yeah, it makes it challenging to stick to the model, I guess. So yeah, you don't want to be too set in an interpretation.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, you might want to redo the model at some point,
Oh
later in
yeah,
the year. And if it's for,
it's going
if
to be
you,
an iterative process. Yeah.
yeah. Let me throw one more at you. Where do the rigs start? And then when do you drill some of those really big step outs? Like that hole you showed all the way to the southeast of the porphyry stock. That's a bold step out hole. When do you drill that one?
That one, those holes will be likely in August when we bring in the heli and the third rig. Uh, although drills we're drilling right now can be converted to heli supported. So if the focus changes, we can go from having one heli supported rig to two to possibly even three, depending on what's warranted by the results, right? But the plan for that is a little bit later in the season. We'll get settled in with the team, drilling along the expansion we can do via skid access rigs, and then once the heli is in and the third rig is in, then we go hard on the step outs.
Look, we're going to be drilling as many hole meters approximately as we've drilled in the previous years combined. We have a lot of cash, so the sequence of the holes doesn't matter as much. We obviously want the stock to go up. But that only matters if you need to raise money, which we don't have to do, and you want to sell the company, which we're not ready to do. So it's just about, making sure that we're logistically ready. So all the holes that you see and all the holes that you want us to drill, we're probably going to drill them, even if they're not shown on the screen. They just might be a little bit later than, just off the hop. But we're starting off in the south, then one rig swinging up to the north, continuing to build out the scale. And sooner or later, we're going to be hitting 9. But again, if we get access to a helicopter a little bit earlier, or we can use one of our fly rigs, maybe we'll go down to 9 a little bit earlier. But whether it's drilled in June, July, or August really doesn't matter in the big scheme of things. We're looking at this thing holistically, and we're looking to prove this thing to be an economic deposit someday. And we're gonna have to drill all the holes we have planned at some point or another. Which kind of dovetails me to a question for Neil. So hole 17, I saw 2 holes. I guess both of them are going in the opposite direction of 17. And I think the second one's actually going to go further west if the first one actually hits. But why not step out west and drill in the same orientation as 17 going southeast?
The orientate from our off-season modeling, the most favorable orientation to drill is out to the west. It intersects the stratigraphy and our understanding of the diking as perpendicularly as we can, right? We would step out and do another fence off of 17 to show continuity if that zone hits. So that's an option. But right now, it actually makes the most sense, both from a geological perspective and logistical perspective, to drill the way we have it drawn up right now.
There's also some historical holes out that way, and while they do show mineralization here and there, the host rocks are a little different, and particularly if you go to the south a bit, and the mineralization style maybe isn't as continuous. So yeah, you have to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, I mean, those historical ones are quite a ways to the west on the other side of the Creek Valley. But yeah, that's also a good point. Is there's,
But if you're drilling to the west, you're pointing toward those things, right?
Yes, yeah, we'll be coming in under those holes for sure. Yeah, in the historical holes.
Yeah, one of the items there I wanted to touch on too, just before we wrap up, is so you announced the MAG study. That's great. Looking forward to that. And then you recently announced that the surface mapping team's been dispatched. Where are they heading? What are they focusing on? Is it just abroad across the property, or are they focusing somewhere?
Let Charlie talk about that.
Maybe I should jump in there. Yeah. I kind of went back when I just talked about some of those older holes. I decided to just go back and try and pull all the outcrop from Noranda's 60s mapping, and some that was done by Hera in the 90s, 95 and 96 together. Made sure that the maps were registered, as well as we could do. And then last year we sent some of the students out just when they did some soil geochem sampling, like grab some outcrop samples. So they did. We saw some interesting things there, and we put that together. And then they are up doing some other work on some nearby claims. So with the snow just recently off, the bush pretty clean and clear, hasn't leafed out, and the bugs not being as much of a hassle when you're out in the field. It's like, do a couple of days and traverse these routes that I put on a map, and they have them on a tablet and they can follow, and gets us, if you find some outcrop and go looking for it, you can see it better with not much Devil's Club and alder and all that stuff leafed out. let's just go and grab a bunch more rocks and see what we see and see if we can put that together and try and make a little bit better of a surface map, especially with a review of all the geology in those shallow holes, which is not always easy to grasp. But I've been around for a while, and I've looked at a lot of rocks on NAC, and I think I can give us a little bit better of a surface framework than what we have, with this covered property. So that's kind of what we're doing, and it's just a very short program, be done by Friday, and let's see where it goes.
Okay, great. And then I think we've talked a little bit about the actual kickoff. Sorry, was that the week of the 20th or May 20th, or where are we looking at, guys? When do drills go on the ground?
We'll be moving the team up to site. We'll be getting into camp on the afternoon of the 22nd. We're driving up from Penticton with the trailer full of all our gear and a bunch of our geos crammed into a truck on the 21st. And drills will be spinning by the 25th. So yeah, ITL's been mobbing the pumps in and the hoses in and all the other little bits and pieces over the last couple of weeks, and doing a little bit of road maintenance pre-season start. So we'll be ready to hit the ground running when the team arrives.
All right.
So are we, does anyone have any more questions, Nate or Rob?
I mean,
Okay,
I could probably go on for another hour, but no, this has been great. Thank you.
Let's save it for spaces. So without further ado, I want to thank everyone for joining the call. Rob and Nate, our Q&A people, and Neil Prouse, our lead geo. Amazing presentation. Good luck at site. He mobs in a couple days. And Charles, thank you as always for your wisdom.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
So American Eagle Gold, we start drilling in a couple days. We sell jeans, not dreams. We're AE on the TSX venture, AmericanEagleGold.ca. We're excited for an amazing program near Smithers, BC, starting any day now.